So now that you've seen a little bit about what Polish saber can do, why don't we chat a little bit about the history? Richard?
Poland in the 17th century was a very fascinating place. They had an elected monarchy. The nobility, known as the Szlachta, had intense rights, and they could kind of do what they want. Each man kind of was his own king, to the point that they could even rebel against the king legally. These nobles were very wild. Jan Pasek's my particular favorite, whose memoirs we still have from the 17th century, and a lot of his writings are in the book that I wrote. The Poles themselves valued their saber, and I'm going to tell a quick story that sort of summarizes the Polish culture that's pretty funny. Okay. There was a Frenchman who was in a city, it was a Polish city, and he had encountered a Polish noble who had just sold his grain. And this Polish noble was very, very wealthy. And the Polish noble was fascinated by this Frenchman because he's in his French clothes in the 17th century. He's very different than the Polish clothes. And they begin to communicate, and the Frenchman who's telling this story says, we couldn't understand each other. He spoke Polish, I spoke French. But then I found out that this Pole spoke fluent Latin. The Poles took a point of pride of learning Latin and would then introduce it into their own language. In Jan Pasek's memoirs, for example, he repeatedly works in little Latin phrases just to kind of show off to everybody like, hey, I speak Latin. So this Frenchman's talking to this Polish guy, and the Polish guy and him start drinking. And the Polish guy goes through a bunch of crazy antics, but at one point he's so drunk, he looks at the Frenchman, he says, man, I love you, you're great. I'm gonna give you my daughter. And the French guy's like, whoa, he's like, yep, and she comes with 100 serfs. And the French guy's like, serfs? We still have serfs? And like, yeah, in Poland we got serfs. So he's like, I'm going to give you my daughter and land. He's like, well, and they drink more, and the French guy's getting pretty nervous. He's like, you know what, you're not dressed correctly. I'm going to dress you like a Pole. And so this Polish noble strips out of his robes and clothes, his jupon, his delia, the whole bit, and he puts the French guy into it. Still drunk. And at which point, he's like, you're almost done, but there's one more thing I got to give you. And he takes out his saber. And he says, this is what gives us our golden freedoms. And it was a symbol of the power and the independence that they had. And he says, this is the most important thing. And he handed it to him. Daughter, land, clothes, but the saber, with great ceremony, it was handed to the Frenchman, who took it. The Polish guy collapsed from drinking too much, at which point the Frenchman said, I had to get out. And that summarizes who these people are. And if you're interested in that, like, these seems like a very interesting people in a very interesting time period, then pick up the book, get some more anecdotes out of it. You can find it on Amazon.com. It's the only book on Polish saber in English, so it's the best and worst book at the same time. I'm Richard Marsden.
Thank you very much for joining us today, Richard.